Hi, everybody. Brian Kilmeade here, looking back at the year that was 2011, and thrilled to have with me, is this true, Chris Stirewalt in Washington, D.C. Chris, are you actually there? The digital editor from FoxNews.com?
Yeah, I love America so much I want to talk about a whole year of it.
And this is kind of cool for us because this is almost a tradition. This will be 2 years in a row.
That's right.
Fantastic. Now, Paul Mercurio is also here, an outstanding comedian who focuses a lot of material, Paul, about what happens on a daily basis, correct, in the world.
Absolutely, yeah. So this is perfect to kind of go over the year and review and hang out with Chris and you.
All right, so I'm going to do this. It's going to spring some memories. Now, if I bring up a story and you don't know it, Chris, the same with you, because you can't follow everything, you could say pass.
No, really?
Almost, yeah.
Okay.
You could pass.
And am I playing for a car? What am I playing for? A car, a refrigerator?
You are for a car refrigerator. It's a new item that goes in your back seat.
It's a green though.
Is it behind that curtain where Carol Marrow is standing?
Exactly, sir. Or you can have what's in my pocket.
Well, okay, so now this is getting awkward.
All right, here we are, January 8th, when a real serious story happens. We get the call on a Friday to come in on a Saturday or a Saturday to come in on a Sunday, I should say, because Arizona Democratic Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords decides to do a meet and greet in a parking lot to find out what her constituents thinks about the job she's doing. And there was a shooting that took place. First off, Chris, this is a story that's still playing out today.
Oh, very much so, and it continues to affect politics today. We're talking about now, is she a potential Senate candidate? Her remarkable recovery, her husband, Mark Kelly, the astronaut, all of those things, and she has really become the heroine of the Democratic Party in a lot of ways, the survivor.
And she took a bullet to the head.
Yeah, I know.
Paul.
I weep like a baby when I stub my toe. So, God bless her. And she was actually the bright spot for me in 2011.
Her comeback.
Her comeback, yeah, obviously not a good. Yeah, her comeback, and just in the political landscape and how crazy it's been, and just also the guy that shot her. Here's a tip to you: if you're going to shoot somebody and you're going to have your mugshot taken, try not to look like a crazy man when you get your mug. He looks like he was smirking, like, "Hey, I'm proud of what I did." Like it was. It's just not the way to be. But I think her comeback's a really great story.
And we can't forget 13 people were injured and 6 others were killed in that shooting, including a little girl and a federal judge, John Roll. Now, afterwards, there was a prayer, essentially a meeting about it. There was a get-together in a huge arena over in Arizona for her. The president attended, put together a great speech, and he calls for an age of a time for civility in politics. Let's listen.
As we discuss these issues, let each of us do so with a good dose of humility. Rather than pointing fingers or assigning blame, let's use this occasion to expand our moral imaginations.
So you hope for civility. Chris, how much civility did we get after that?
Well, let's remember why he had to say that in his speech was because that immediately after it happened, some folks on his team tried to politicize, not his team specifically, but on the left, Democrats tried to politicize this thing, brought up Sarah Palin's web ad that had crosshairs on it and "Don't retreat, reload" statement after the 2010 elections, and really immediately jumped to the conclusions like, is this a Tea Party person? Is this some radical Republican out trying to kill a Democratic Congresswoman? They overcooked it. They went way too far, and then there was blowback, and then the president found himself in the situation of having to go out and counsel for, on his side and the other side, calm and reasonableness in a moment of tragedy.
Right. I mean, sometimes crazy is just crazy. You know what I mean? This is a guy with voices in his head telling him to wash his car, and he doesn't have a car. You know what I mean? Like the guy who shot her. Sometimes you sort of read into people's actions more than what's there.
But Chris is indicating, and I know you pick up on it, is that a lot of people said, see, the Tea Party.
Right.
Those guys are such extremists, whether it's guns or Democrats, they're taking action. They misread the message.
Right.
And it was clear that it wasn't, and this guy, Jared Loughner, is off his rocker. The president asked for an age of civility, and then he sat down with Bill O'Reilly. Let's go to cut 3, Joey, and listen how that came up.
I thought you gave a great speech in Arizona on the civility factor. I appreciate it. But I don't think that people are going to respond to it. I think that the civility in the media and in politics is going to go downhill. How much damage do you believe the media is doing by participating in this rancor? And people have accused me of that.
Yeah. I don't think it helps.
But how much damage is it doing to the country?
I think what it does is, over the long term, it is making it harder and harder for the sensible center to get together to solve problems.
Well, there he is, sitting down with the president right after that. So the president, of course, in those moments usually does sensational. When he has time for a major speech, he usually delivers. And by the way, they went on to Mark Kelly, the husband, who goes to space. Think about this: one of the last space shuttle missions, the husband of the congresswoman that was shot, and they end up the husband-wife team put together a book called Gabby: A Story of Courage and Hope. And she's still struggling with the speech, Chris, but you get the sense that she's going to be able to overcome it.
Oh, and like I said, I'm sorry, this is a Washington point of view, but this is actually potentially consequential for the 2012 election cycle because she has become a rallying point for Democrats in Arizona, a heavily Republican state, and actually given some grounds to the argument from the Obama team that he might be able to play in that state. It's still sounds a little far-fetched, but, she's changed the game.
Right. Real quick, when it comes to sports, the Green Bay Packers defeated the Pittsburgh Steelers to win the Super Bowl. That was great for the Steelers and everybody else, for the Packers and everybody else that follows the team, but it was not good for Dallas. We watched a situation where they built seats that were unsteady that had to be ripped out. We watched the roof collapse a couple of days before, and people get hurt by falling ice, and then it snows there and they have no plows, Paul.
Well, when you got a 4,000-mile television screen, you can't afford anything else.
Can you believe that?
It's like insanity.
Why do you go to the game to watch a flat screen?
And, I was so happy that Aaron Rodgers won. I thought he handled the whole Brett Favre thing really well. Like, he just sat back through all of that and was a real diplomat, and thank God for him. And, Brett Favre, of course, during the Super Bowl was probably texting his privates to women all over the country because he had nothing better to do. Right. But I was happy that Aaron, I thought that was a guy that deserved to win the Super Bowl.
We're not even out of January yet. We have a whole year to do. We got to talk about Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak getting ousted, Charlie Sheen's meltdown that we all witnessed, and so much more. Yeah. This is a special edition of Kilmeade and Friends Year in Review.
Nothing this side of deplorable that a certain Chaim Levine, that's Chuck's real name, mistook this rock star for his own selfish exit strategy, bro. Check it, Alex. I embarrassed him in front of his children and the world by healing at a pace that his unevolved mind cannot process. Okay, last I checked, Chaim, I've spent, I think, close to the last decade, effortlessly and magically converting your tin cans into pure gold.
I don't know who that is. I can't make out the voice. Charlie Sheen from the CBS sitcom 2.5 Men. It's the #1 show in the world. He gets this huge contract, and then he implodes, taking on executive producer Chuck Lorre, who did the impossible. He fired his star. So the producer wins over the talent. Chris Stirewalt continues with us from Washington as we look back at the year in review, and Paul Mercurio is here, the outstanding comedian. Paul, first off, Charlie Sheen's meltdown. Put that in perspective.
I thought it was the most entertaining month and a half of 2011. I mean, first of all, there was at one point there was talk that he was going to do his own reality show,
right?
And my feeling was like, how do you top your actual life with a reality show?
Like, why stop down and tape?
Do you jump on a unicorn and drive through a warehouse of cocaine? Like, what do you do to top your own? Again, exactly. Like, how do you top that? I thought that was so hilarious.
Well, were you surprised? I mean, for a while, this guy's Twitter account was probably the #1 in the world outside Demi Moore's ex-husband. But Charlie Sheen, Chris, this is a guy that actually tried to get better in front of us, but first did a world tour in which he wildly screwed up. Did he ever go to Washington?
The Torpedo of Truth tour, I'm not sure if it came to Washington. I doubt that Mrs. Stirewalt would have been really cool with me going down to that. Because Charlie and I, we used to hang out. It was a pretty big deal back in the day. But remember when the president came out with Winning the Future?
Yes.
You remember that?
Yeah.
And Sarah Palin made the joke about the acronym WTF and all that stuff.
Must we?
But even that, so the long arm of warlock Charlie Sheen reached even into presidential politics, because when Obama came out and said winning the future, no one could think of anything but Charlie Sheen saying winning.
Right. Let's go. Let's keep it in entertainment for a second. The King's Speech, the #1 movie. It is a movie that sadly I have not seen. So let's watch the whole thing. Excuse me. Let's listen to 40. Let's listen to 41 seconds together. This is cut 4.
James, you are nominated tonight for Best Actor. Your first nomination. So are you nervous?
No.
Come on, you must want to win a little bit.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, what do you get if you win?
You get an Oscar.
Yeah, but do I, like, get money with it, or?
No, you get prestige. For the rest of your life, everyone will refer to you as Academy Award winner James Franco.
What do you mean, everyone? Like even my mom? That'd be weird if my mom called me Academy Award winner James Franco.
Well,
I've known her a long time.
Wow. So that was part of his ad-libbing on his nomination speech. James Franco phoned it in, Paul.
That was awkward. I thought about moving to Canada after that, and I realized that wasn't far enough away. It was ironic that the King's Speech won in a year where, like, everybody around the world was questioning authority, right? And the Best Picture was about, like, a stuttering, Nazi-sympathizing English king.
Yeah.
Right? And it was sort of like...
Whoa!
No? What?
He's not inaccurate.
Whoa.
What? What? Why are you... I'm sorry. You're
That was a
Colin Firth,
I mean,
big fan.
well, here's the
president of his fan club.
I absolutely love that movie.
I thought it was
a
great.
Spectacular movie. And you know what the best thing about that movie, and the most inherently wonderful thing about the fact that it could win, is its message. And the message was this: you have his older brother, who renounced the throne to consort with Wallace Simpson, has always been the hero, the glamour man, the did it for romance in all of the movies, and it's been disgusting. But here was the man who stepped up and did the job despite his own reservations about himself, and was dutiful, and at a time of war for his country. How magnificent that he was able to be a hero. Finally.
I'm sorry, I grew up in a blue-collar family. My father put floors in for a living. I have trouble going, oh, the poor guy had to be king. Oh, my God. Did he have to have a gold bidet to clean himself? That poor guy. Like, I can't, I'm sorry.
Right.
That guy had a great life.
All right, if I saw the movie, we spend another 20 minutes, but I'm being very selfish now. Does everyone remember this?
He lives in the world of the make-believe, in my opinion, and even the fact that he became president is the world of the make-believe. How this happened. Obama is unwilling or unable to show his birth certificate. He had lousy marks in school and he got into Harvard on a scholarship. Explain that one.
So he was on a roll, and then when he took on the birth certificate, Chris, it was the beginning of the end, because 2 days later, after President Obama would reveal his birth certificate, we got Bin Laden, and Trump took such a beating at the I believe the Washington Correspondents'
I thought we were still
Dinner.
on Sheen. Oh, okay.
No,
all right.
we've gone to Donald Trump.
I think I really did a great job in getting him to, I mean, first of all, I haven't seen it. I'm looking at that. It doesn't, I'll look at it later. I don't need to look at your copy, but I hope everything's perfect.
Unbelievable. It's like if this guy robbed a bank, Trump, he would congratulate himself for bringing it to the cops' attention. He's out of his mind.
He is not. I
one
find him making a lot of sense. I just think he made a bad tactical move.
No one would. Well, but how about this? Who would have thought that the President of the United States would be forced to brandish his birth certificate at the behest of a reality show host? That was, to me, the totally surreal moment. You're right, the Bin Laden stuff blew it all away. But what a surreal moment when the leader of the free world, the most powerful man in America, has to come out and say, because Donald Trump said so, I'm going to show
Right, exactly. No, that's
that
a really
was
good
weird.
point. When I think Trump wanted the birth certificates because he was trying to find one actual American that watched the Miss USA pageant.
You leave that alone. It is very popular.
All right.
And he was able to stick picked by a winner
Yes.
who was going through a rough time.
Yes, that's
I think
true.
that took a lot of courage.
Okay,
that was
good.
2 years ago.
I retract everything I said.
Listen, I want to go backwards in time just a little bit because it's just too big a story. The ouster of Hosni Mubarak, he ends up leaving on trial, and the upheaval that followed. You know, we had it start in Tunisia, but when Egypt overthrew their dictator, the Arab Spring truly took root. Put that in perspective, Chris.
Well, I mean, look, the whole situation is this: for the president and all of these things, foreign policy was a potential weak spot. He's been doing everything he can to try to turn it into a strong spot with the bin Laden killing and these other things. He's made his case, but with the Arab Spring and the ongoing unrest in the Middle East, he's got some vulnerabilities there.
Right, and we still don't know what to make of it, but just see Mubarak out of power.
Can I just ask a question? Why do dictators never know when to retire?
It's unbelievable.
Like, you're 82, because my mother's 86, she runs a furniture store, and we have this conversation, and I'm sure listeners out there are like, Mom, don't you
Is
think
she a dictator?
No, well, trust me, she is, but we don't have 7 hours in a therapy couch to go through that. But,
Right.
but you
Although
know,
Chris is a good listener.
do you ever wonder, like, if his kids were like, Dad, don't you think you should retire? What would I do if I could not hook someone's testicles up to a battery? I would be so depressed, and if I could not violate civil rights. Like, I just don't want to just get out. You got all this money.
Well, he ended up getting out, and then he paid the ultimate
Right,
price because
exactly.
he didn't get out far enough.
Right, exactly. Gaddafi, all these
and
guys.
Gaddafi as well. We'll talk about him a little bit later, but that was back in February. Let's go back to March, and actually even further than that. Let's go to a moment that we're never going to forget, and that's when word gets out that there's been a major killing, and it is the killing of Osama bin Laden. Let's listen.
Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda, and a terrorist who's responsible for the murder of thousands of innocent men, women, and children. It was nearly 10 years ago that a bright September day was darkened by the worst attack on the American people in our history. Nearly 3,000 citizens taken from us, leaving a gaping hole in our hearts. And so shortly after taking office, I directed Leon Panetta, the director of the CIA, to make the killing or capture of bin Laden the top priority of our war against Al-Qaeda. We give thanks for the men who carried out this operation, for they exemplify the professionalism, patriotism, and unparalleled courage of those who serve our country. Let us remember that we can do these things not just because of wealth or power, but because of who we are. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
A great moment. I would love the order to take him out, but way too much I in that, and I made it a priority, and I pulled it off. Paul?
Yeah, I think his only mistake was he should have done it a year and a half later. Would have helped him in the election, probably.
If you want him to get reelected.
Yeah.
I don't know if he would have stayed in that place with all those wives who were driving him nuts anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
Chris? You're never going to forget that. On a Sunday night, we don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
And neither will the president stop talking about it. He continuing. He said the other day when somebody asked him if he was an appeaser, he said, "Ask Osama bin Laden if I'm an appeaser," and he continues to hit that very hard, trying to maximize a political
I was
benefit.
disappointed in bin Laden. He was such a hypocrite.
This is the year in review. We have much more to go on a special edition of Kilmeade and Friends.
Sometimes it is what it looks like. Someone sends Congressman Weiner's account, hacks in and takes a picture of something that may make fun of the person's name, sends it, directs it to someone, it never goes anywhere. It was mischief. Now, if it turns out that it's more than that, if it turns out that this is some kind of a larger conspiracy, if it turns out that authorities should be brought in, do my constituents really think that we need a national investigation with national resources brought to bear just because Congressman Weiner had his account hacked?
and then this happened right after.
Is it inappropriate for a member of Congress to be following young women on their Twitter accounts not even from their district? You several young women in your account. 40,000 people follow you. You only follow a couple hundred.
It's really outrageous. The implication is outrageous. First of all, no. If you ask the question, it's outrageous. I have a right to say it's outrageous.
Okay.
Is this Twitter picture in question a picture of you?
Well, let's remember this Twitter picture in question is a hack or a prank that someone posted on my Twitter page with someone else's name in it, who says she never got it and doesn't know me and I don't know her.
You definitively didn't send it, but you can't definitively say whether it's you or not.
I can definitively say that I did not send this. I can definitively say it looks a lot like a prank and a joke. Last Friday night, I tweeted a photograph of myself that I intended to send as a direct message as part of a joke to a woman in Seattle.
Awesome.
Once I realized I had posted it to Twitter, I panicked. I took it down and said that I had been hacked. I then continued with that story, to stick to that story, which was a hugely regrettable mistake. Today I am announcing my resignation from
And those people in the background, Howard Stern's guys.
Great sound bites.
Chris, this guy was going to be mayor of New York.
Well, look, I mean, when you think about the appalling scope of the dishonesty and the fact that he sat that interview with Brett Baier, and the look on Brett's face was so awesome during that interview, because he sat there and it was like, now you're sure. Just one more time. I'm just going to let you say one more time. You can't say it's not your wiener, but you can say that you did not send it. This is where you're at now. So he ends up at this absolutely bizarre point where he's like, I don't know how many pictures of my genitalia are out there. I can't be sure. I haven't seen them all, so I don't know. But it could be me, but I don't know who sent it. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I agree. And it's always the cover-up. It's always the cover-up. And here's the bottom line. He shouldn't have resigned because he tweeted pictures of himself. He should have resigned because he was so stupid to put his career and his wife and his family and his name in jeopardy for virtual sex. He never had actual sex.
Yeah, he didn't do anything.
It's like having a torrid love affair with Farmville. It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense.
That's when I became disenchanted with my politicians, because they can't even do a sex scandal right.
You know, I have a different take. I was amazed when I found out the answer, and you kind of knew he was guilty, but you didn't know the extent. The fact that he could sit there and stare every news reporter in the face and call these press conferences.
Right.
He called Brett's office and told him to come down. He knew he was lying. But what kind of psychotic behavior is this to bring on the questions and yell at you for finding out the truth?
There's a clinical psychological term for that. It's called Bill Clinton. That's what it's called.
well, Bill Clinton didn't want it. He didn't say I have
sexual relations with that woman.
That's a good point.
That woman. What's her name? Miss Lewinsky.
Yeah, whatever that is. All right, so let's move on. We have that situation with Weiner, and he's gone, and he was an up-and-coming star in the Democratic Party, and as I said, was a favorite to become the next mayor from New York. Now we go on to scandal. President Obama, the Fast and Furious, this ill-timed, this ill-conceived program. I have a great idea. We can't control the drug situation across the border, so let's give them guns, tag the guns, and we'll see who gets them. And whoever uses our new guns will know how guilty they are. The drug kingpins. This sounds just so brilliant on its face, Paul.
Oh my God! There's a new the ATF has a new name, and it's called Alcohol, Tobacco, and F-ups, because it's like you literally, that would be the kind of thing that you'd sit around Fridays having a beer if you weren't a politician and go, let's try that, and you'd be like, nah, no one would ever do that.
Give guns to the drug runners?
Right, exactly. The drug runners had to literally stop smoking their own pot to make sure that they weren't having the wool pulled over their eyes. That's how crazy that was.
Hey, Chris, is this going to get bigger?
Oh, yeah. Well, look, here's what it comes down to. Eric Holder is a marked man. Attorney General Eric Holder is a marked man over this. There will at least have to be at some point a high-level resignation at the Justice Department over this, because it was such a thoroughgoing botch. Now, look, people do stuff like this. Is not unheard of to do these sorts of stings or these things, but the degree of botchness and how terribly it was run, and, of course, very specifically the death of a U.S. Border Patrol agent through the use of one of these weapons has left it in a point where if Holder doesn't have to go, at the very least, his deputy has to go.
I have complete confidence in Attorney General Holder in how he handles his office. He has been very aggressive in going after gun running and transactions.
He's been aggressive by doing it.
Sounds like Bush supporting Brownie, you know, when after
There's been a lot of
Katrina.
cooperation between the United States and Mexico on this front. He's indicated that he was not aware of what was happening in Fast and Furious. Certainly I was not, and I think both he and I would have been very unhappy if somebody had suggested that guns were allowed to pass through that could have been prevented by the United States.
Could have been prevented. They were sold. But they were American guns.
It was like it was like this plan was come up by the writing staff for Gilligan's Island. It was,
which, by the way, they got no residuals for that to air around the world, and for those guys not to be well compensated.
I know,
bothers
exactly.
me. And the skipper's no longer with us. Let's listen to another scandal. President Obama trying to make sense of Solyndra, but first lauding it.
The true engine of economic growth will always be companies like Solyndra. Companies like Solyndra are leading the way toward a brighter and more prosperous future.
Is that true? Solyndra ends up costing us millions upon millions of dollars and won't belly up in a brand new building that we just built, Chris.
Yeah, it's been, the biggest part of Solyndra is that it's become a shorthand for the stimulus, and poll after poll that we see says that Americans think that the stimulus has been a bust. And, 68 or 70% of Americans in a recent Reuters poll said that they thought that it just added to the deficit and didn't add to job creation. So the stimulus is the underlying problem. Then you take Solyndra, where Democratic donors get these very favorable loans, subsidized loans, more than $500 million for this firm that had a business model that everybody knew. And we have now seen the emails inside the White House that say, this is a terrible idea. This business model stinks. And they said, yes, this is why we got to give them the money. So it's become a shorthand for what people didn't like about the stimulus.
I just want you to hear one more about Solyndra, how this thing has ended up, at least the last time. Here is the president now, cut 28, talking about Solyndra.
There were going to be some companies that did not work out. Solyndra was one of them. But the process by which the decision was made was on the merits. It was straightforward. And, of course, there were going to be debates internally when you're dealing with something as complicated as this.
Well, this is a solar panel company. How do you go out of business? Does the sun raise its prices? Like, what the?
Well, I'm trying to answer your questions, and you keep on interrupting.
Well, because you don't know what you're doing, sir. That's the problem. Get Ron Paul in there. He'll take care of it.
No matter what
Don't be a
industry,
Grinch.
If it's not your money, you just don't care.
Right.
I mean,
exactly.
that's why if you work for the town, you work for the county. It's very hard. It takes a special person to be motivated by something that's not going to benefit them, whether it's a promotion.
I think this should hurt him more than it's going to, but I don't think Americans care about solar energy enough to care about the scandal. That's the problem.
They know we're not ready for it.
Yeah.
Do you remember this phrase, millionaires and billionaires?
What we're talking about under a balanced approach is asking Americans whose incomes have gone up the most over the last decade, millionaires and billionaires, to share in the sacrifice everyone else has to make. Warren Buffett had an op-ed that he wrote where he said, we've got to stop coddling billionaires like me. He pointed out that he pays a lower tax rate than anybody in his office, including the secretary. And the reason is because most of his wealth comes from capital gains.
Yep.
You don't get those tax breaks. You're paying more than that.
That's for people who have like Kilmeade kind of money. That's what he was talking about there.
I'd never heard. Now we're in the middle of class warfare, but millionaires and billionaires have had it too good for too long. When the top 25% pay 86% of all taxes, I believe there's a counter argument to that.
There's a counter-argument, but the biggest thing here for the president, and this is what we have to remember, is that you have to play the cards that you've got. And what he's got left in his hand is this, essentially, and he's got to try to brand Republicans as the puppets of the 1%, and he's going to keep wanging away at that until he gets somewhere.
Without those comments, real quick, Paul, there is no Zuccotti Park. There is no Occupy movement.
Absolutely.
I believe.
No, absolutely. He has to understand that, but I think his eyes are closed to it.
Yeah, perhaps.
I'm against corporation because they don't pay me money. $7 an hour? Go get a job. I got a job, Mo. I do have a job. You're a bum, Jew. Man, I'm a Jew. Why are you fighting with us?
Occupy Wall Street movement began Occupy San Francisco, Seattle, Washington, Florida, Dallas. It was a huge movement that we still don't know exactly why it happened. For me, it happened because the president was talking about fair share and millionaires and billionaires. But Chris Stirewalt and Paul Mercurio are still with us. Chris, what is this Occupy movement? What has it meant?
Well, what it's meant has been that you can't recreate the Tea Party. And that really, when you get right down to it, this came out of a movement by the magazine Adbusters up in Vancouver, Canada, calling for this. And basically the argument was the Tea Party got all this attention in 2010 and 2009 because a bunch of middle-class white people went out in the street and said, by gosh, these taxes are too high, we shouldn't do this. And they were envious of all of the media attention that came around that, and they said we should have one of our own. And as a matter of fact, we have the mechanism for doing this. Labor unions and protest groups know how to do this stuff.
I got to be honest with you, Chris. That's a good point, but I think you give these organizers too much credit. I was down Wall Street. I did some segments down there, and it is a mess. I understand the message. They feel disenfranchised. They feel like the rich banks got taken care of, and they're not, and blah blah blah. But you see, there's no spokesman. It's literally run by like Fredo from The Godfather. It's ridiculous.
I knew it was you.
Listen,
I knew.
The highlight of the year,
I dropped the gun.
The story of this year politically for those not running for president has to be Governor Christie. This guy is a man like no other. Cut 37.
You don't send your children to public schools, you send them to private schools. So I was wondering why you think it's fair to be cutting school funding to public schools.
First off, it's none of your business. I don't ask you where you send your kids to school. Don't bother me about where I send mine. Secondly, I pay $38,000 a year in property taxes for a public school system, predominantly in Mendham, that my wife and I don't choose to utilize because we've decided as parents that we believe a religious education should be part of our children's everyday.
Get the hell off the beach in Asbury Park and get out. Get out of your chair.
It's literally like Tony Soprano running this. I love it. You got to love it. I mean, he's awesome. And people go, well, they brought up this issue of his weight and whether he's too fat. It means he's undisciplined to be president. It's like, what difference does it matter? They say Romney's too perfect looking. What difference does it matter what they look like? Look at Mount Rushmore. Have you seen those four guys? They look like they could be mascots for Pep Boys. They did a pretty good job taking care of this country.
Chris Christie's not going anywhere. Am I right, Chris Stirewalt?
Oh, he might end up on the ticket if Mitt Romney gets the nod, or if whoever gets the nod. He's a very popular figure, and he's a more moderate kind of Republican that has done well in a dark blue state like New Jersey. So Christie has a lot of appeal when you start thinking about the general election. He says he's not into being vice president, but that can change when you get the offer.
All right, I want you to hear another moment that President Obama would like to live on in infamy, and certainly through the next election. It's a great moment for America, the death of Anwar al-Awlaki.
The death of al-Awlaki is a major blow to al-Qaeda's most active operational affiliate. But make no mistake, this is further proof that al-Qaeda and its affiliates will find no safe haven.
And that was a moment we weren't expecting, but they almost got him a couple of weeks prior, and then they kill him.
I got to tell you, if you told me the election leading up to Obama's getting put into office that he was going to be this badass who's going to go around and kill people, I'd be like, you're crazy. But this guy is, kicking butt and taking names. I mean, I got to give him credit for that.
Yeah, I mean, establishing a drone base in Africa was a great move, right, Chris?
Well, look, it's not been all unalloyed political benefit to the president. Remember that, because he's had to fall back on, remember the global war on terrorism and the changing of that to overseas contingency operations when the president came into office, and this very complicated legalistic response to exactly what we're doing is this war, law enforcement. Well, now it's pretty clearly war, because Anwar al-Awlaki is from New Mexico, and he was riding around in Yemen, and we killed him with a drone strike. Our armed forces killed him with a drone strike. The administration has not reconciled its legal views on this to basically take
but
the...
But do you think Americans care? Do you really think Americans care about
Americans
that?
don't.
That's a distinction without a difference.
One important segment of Americans care, and that is the president's political base, who find this distasteful, and they don't like him basically taking the Bush position on these things without saying it out loud.
It's like killing a guy who looks guilty of murder on his way to the trial as they're walking him in.
I don't have a problem with that.
Either do I.
I know.
But I would like to question some of them and find out where the other guys are.
Yeah, that's a good point. I want to know who left the mayonnaise on the subway.
Steve Jobs. I know, we're still trying to find that out. Steve Jobs died, and it was an international event. The co-founder of Apple passed away after an 8-year battle with pancreatic cancer. We're not going to forget that. For me, that's my man of the year. But one of the stories of the year will always be the death of a menace. That is Muammar Gaddafi, cut 42.
This is a momentous day in the history of Libya. The dark shadow of tyranny has been lifted, and with this enormous promise, the Libyan people now have a great responsibility.
And that was him talking about the death of Gaddafi.
I mean,
by his own people.
and with that, it just that and the way it played out literally in front of the world on YouTube and the way he
Still
was attacked.
there.
And that line goes, "Why are you doing this to me?" I just wanted somebody to go, "Well, let me show you the arm I don't have anymore as to why I'm doing this to you."
Yeah, that would help. The other thing when we talk about the election, Chris Stirewalt, it's Herman Cain and his female eruption.
I've never sexually harassed anyone, and yes, I was falsely accused while I was at the National Restaurant Association.
You know I have a boyfriend.
That woman actually did sides.
Wow.
She played out Herman Cain's side and her side.
Oh my God!
She did.
With that
In the
voice.
car.
Oh my God!
Chris, this guy was leading.
He was not only leading, but he was way out in front. And here is the caution for both parties, for everybody in politics. At the time that this stuff started to come out on Herman Cain, a lot of people came out and said, high-tech lynching. This is outrageous. People can't be doing this to Herman Cain. Fast forward 3 weeks. Fast forward, and Herman Cain says on television, yes, this woman that I met at a convention 13 years ago, obviously I've been sending her money without my wife knowing all these years. Who doesn't do that? And it was like, oh, never mind.
Right, so Cain's out. Jerry Sandusky would take over the headlines with the scandal in Penn State and the molestation charge. It's just horrific. There's some other moments that are still unfolding before us. But in the end, Time Magazine names their Person of the Year. They name it the Protester. I'm outraged. I go with Steve Jobs and the SEAL Team 6 co-winners that took out Osama bin Laden. You, Paul?
I don't understand why they did that. Magazines are having trouble being sold. Protesters have no money to buy the magazine that they're on.
Chris, who's your Person of the Year?
SEAL Team 6 all the way.
Yeah, mine is Giffords for taking that bullet and doing great.
Fantastic. I'll meet you all back here in studio, same outfit, same cologne, next year to review 2012.
I hope so.
Make it a great year, everybody, and thanks for listening to Kilmeade and Friends.
Excuse me. You know I have a boyfriend.
Excuse me.